Right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Tom Newton. I'm Senior Product Manager at Smoothwall. I was going to give a slide on a deck on safeguarding, but then I decided I couldn't be bothered. So I made something new up yesterday morning, which, as far as I go, is usually, it's quite prepared as far as I go with my talks at the EduGeek conference. So what's the plan? Quick introduction, then I'm going to give you an incredibly dull sales pitch, and followed by some Q&A. Maybe not. So it's a long time since I've done this conference, so hopefully none of you will have heard any of this before. That's quite useful. I'm just back at Smoothwall after a little hiatus, and we had no conference last year, so getting back to the swing of things. As you might have guessed, I'm not one for scripts or notes or really preparing very well, so when this goes horribly wrong, that's situation normal. So we're in the internet safety business, so what I'm going to do is take a look at what my colleagues in what we call the digital safety team have been doing for the last year or 18 months, the interesting things they've spotted. And if you do miss the tiresome sales pitch, my colleague Nick is waiting to give you just that around the corner. So who are the digital safety team? Well, they're the group of people within Smoothwall who look at all the feedback from our customers, both automatic and manual, and try and work out how to build new rules and new software to detect things that we don't want people visiting. They are not just the porn police. This lovely picture here did once represent what these guys do. They don't just sit in front of their computers, unfortunately for them, and look at porn all day. Although without being too crass about it, some of their job is looking at quite objectionable things. It is actually quite a difficult job at times. But they have a much wider remit these days. Back in the old days of web filtering, it was all about, can we just block you from getting on porn, and it's a much broader job today. So the first thing I'm going to look at is something called homographs. I don't know if anyone's familiar with a homographic attack. What this is a homograph is something where two things are written the same. So where you write two letters and both those letters look similar. So now we have on the web Unicode domains. So back in the early days of the internet, you could only have your domain names written in ASCII, American Standard Code for Information Interchange. And because it's American, they didn't bother with anything foreign. If you were lucky, you might get a cedilla or an accent somewhere, but as far as letters from the rest of the world go, their attitude was, well, you can do without those, just use good old American letters. Not anymore. The internet is much more of an international place. We can now write domain names in Cyrillic, we can write domain names in Arabic, we can write domain names in Greek script, we can do just about anything. And that makes the possible number of characters in an internet domain name far, far more than it ever was before. Now, unfortunately, some of the characters in other languages look really, really like some of the characters in ASCII. So here's an example. I don't know if you can see it, not the biggest of screen, but up here, is this got a laser pointing affair on it?
Yes, it has.
So I press the top button. Whoa, look at that. I'll get Chris with so this looks very like, in my browser here, it looks very like adidas.de. It's very like such a manufacturer. If you look closely, the eye doesn't have a dot across it, because that eye is not a real eye. The rest of them are regular, good old honest ASCII characters, but that eye is actually from some other character script. It's something that looks really like an eye. And there's tons of characters like that. So it's super easy for the bad guys to register a domain that looks really, really plausibly like a big company's domain. And there are so many of these, it's nigh on impossible for those companies to go out there and proactively register domains that might be misused in this way. And not all browsers show this, so there's two ways of representing these domains. Way number one is like that in the script it's supposed to be, and there's an ASCII only way to represent those domains. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. I'm going to show you what we built a little test system to try and detect domains that might be involved in homograph attacks, so that when we see an unrecognised domain, we can push it through that and try and work it out. So hopefully this demonstration will work. It was pre-recorded the other day, so there should be no technical hitches. Let's have a little go. So what I'm going to show you is running 2 domains through this system, and then I'll take you through actually how we spot these. So let's see if it just clicks right through. This is what PowerPoint was moaning about. No, it wasn't. It won't. I'm going to have to try and click on that and see if it works. PowerPoint was complaining about. I'm going to load this in Chrome, guys, because I don't trust Edge as far as I throw it.
It's not appearing on the big screen.
That is not appearing on the big screen. Captain AB, sorted.
I don't know.
I'm going to get a t-shirt made up with that on now. Captain AB.
Yeah, it's got your presentation as well.
Why don't go Windows P and duplicate it?
You can try. You never know. Actually, no, because it will show all these notes that he said he didn't have.
There's no notes. It just doesn't matter, there's no notes. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, let's play this. So I've recorded this with a tool especially for recording command lines. So what I've got is I've got a little Python script, and I'm firstly going to feed it google.com. And what this does is it goes through and it looks for other domains that might be like that, and checks to see if those domains are domains Smoothwall has ever seen. So now I'm going to feed it that example we saw previously, the Adidas site, and I'm going to feed it that in a different notation. This is the pure ASCII notation, which you would notice if it appeared in your browser. So if you ever see a site that starts XN, it's one of these type of sites, these Unicode sites, and you can see up there. Let's have a look. Just get my pointing device. You can see up there. So that's it in IDN mode. That's it written in full. That's what it looks like in Punicode. And we said we've never seen this site before, but something that looks like it, adidas.de, is categorized. That looks sufficiently like, so we've written a bit of code to find out whether whether a piece of text looks like another piece of text. So in that case, this site is potentially malicious. It's potentially pretending to be another site. So as I say, far from spending all their day typing porn phrases into Google, you know, man's got to have a hobby. This is one of those things that our digital safety team have been working on in order to try and keep these malicious links from our end users. And one of the problems with these is these can contain anything. They often contain malware. They often contain links to some very seedy sites. But more often than not, they are sites pretending to sell things like high-end watches, sportswear, things like that, pretending to sell those cheaply and just harvesting people's credit card details. So one to watch out for. That didn't work too well. Back to PowerPoint. There we go. That looks well again. So the next thing I'm going to cover is a technique called domain fronting. I don't know if anyone has seen this happening in their network, but you probably know it by another name. You'll probably know it by tools such as Siphon or other proxy avoidance tools. So there are a load of these things out there that are sort of anti-filtering techniques built to get around various censorship. And domain fronting is something over the past couple of years we've seen increasingly commonly used by this. So what is domain fronting? It's a way of hiding your traffic behind an innocuous domain. So it relies on content delivery networks. So it relies on things like Amazon, like Google, like CloudFront, who are providing services for other websites. And it relies on those services allowing a connection with their SSL certificate. So it looks like you're going to google.com, it looks like you're going to CloudFront, or it looks like you're going to Amazon. But underneath that domain is fronted, and underneath that, the actual domain that people are going to is quite different. and that domain will usually be some server that folks are using to proxy their web traffic through. Now it does, say, relies on those content delivery networks, which you cannot block, because those content delivery networks back most every site on the internet. So if you block Amazon's S3 storage, or you block Google Compute, or you block parts of Microsoft Azure, you're basically going to ruin the internet. You can't use half the sites that are on there if you block those content delivery networks. So in April of last year, Google actually removed what they called it a quirk. They said this domain fronting was a quirk and not a feature. I've never called it that before. I would say it's a downright bug. Now, would software vendors ever tell you something isn't a bug? Anyway, less of that said about that, the better, I reckon. So yeah, Google removed this quirk from their software stack, which meant people like Siphon and the other proxy avoidance tools had to move away from using Google, but still many vendors have it out there. And really the only way to stop domain fronting is to look deep into that SSL traffic and see when certificates don't match that internal traffic. But it's a challenging thing to block. Yes, I say it's still prevalent in other content delivery networks. Some have threatened to remove it, but not all by any stretch. Next up for a fun change to regular internet programming is decentralized social media. So we're very used to the internet having turned into kind of 4 different websites which just have screenshots of the other website in them, like Twitter and Facebook, very centralized social media. But of late we have seen a trend of things like Mastodon. Any of you are on Mastodon, if you can be on it. Mastodon is a face Twitter clone. It's a bit Facebook, it's a bit Twittery. It's a fairly traditional social network, but the key is that there are many tens of thousands of sort of Mastodon sites, and you use one login, you can log into all of them, and they're all about something different. Believe it or not, toot.shoes, that's an actual web address. You can actually go to that web address. Do not actually go to that web address. Really do not actually go to that. It is not about shoes. And unless I don't know what a toot is, it's not about those either. So really don't go there. That's why I didn't put an HTTP in front of it. I did not want this machine actually pinging that. But that's just one of these social media sites. And then, as I say, there's tens of thousands of them. And they cover, from the banal to the ridiculous and kind of worse. And are really hard to block by domain. As you can see, the new top-level domains like .shoes, fairly innocent. You might block .xxx and .porn, but you're not going to block .shoes necessarily. So we've had to again look at content filtering, look at where the lists of these sites are, and try to sort of infiltrate how they work in order to make sure we've got good coverage. And we've also seen more and more chat apps that have expanded from just being simple chat apps to being ways to share media, often ways to share, pirate movies and things like that, which can become something of a cesspit. And chasing all those down is something that the digital safety team have been assiduous in this year. So these guys, they focus on low control, encryption, and decentralization. It's the perfect breeding ground for shall we say, the margins of the internet that ordinarily we'd like to block. And it,
Are you saying basically it's just like Usenet Vault?
it's like Usenet, only with even worse people. For those are old enough to remember Usenet, yeah, and it's worse than YouTube, which in my view takes some doing, because that place is a cesspit, yeah. It's not just Peppa Pig videos, it really isn't. There is no porn on YouTube, but the rest of it is an absolute cesspit. So the list approach is less and less useful with these things, because literally there are so many of them, and they appear and disappear sort of at will. So again, that content filtering approach has had to be taken with, particularly with Mastodon sites. Crypto mining, luckily, going away because Bitcoin isn't worth a carrot at the moment, which is which is helpful. Am I too short to be picked up on the webcam? Is that what you're saying?
We don't want to comment, but
People have been watching the top of my cheese box all afternoon, that's great. Well, I guess they didn't get to see my face. It's an advantage in everything, isn't there? It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. So the crypto mining malware is what we've seen is regular malware has not been as easy to deliver as it has been. Breaking out the browser sandboxes is ever more challenging thanks to the work of people like Google and their Project Zero team looking for bugs, stopping people breaking out of the sandbox on your browser. So it's hard for someone to put drive-by malware on a web page that will actually infect the rest of your machine outside of that browser sandbox. But JavaScript can use as much CPU time as it likes. You know, anyone who uses something like Slack, these modern applications that think using 3 gigs of RAM and topping out a core on an i7 is perfectly acceptable behaviour for a website. Well, not in my view it isn't, but they do it. So a JavaScript app can sit there, you know, pegging out cores on your nice quick laptop. And what this was used for is distributed worker malware, sitting and mining bitcoins on people's laptops just by really running the CPUs using JavaScript. Not very efficient, not an efficient way to mine Bitcoin, but if it's not your electricity, and there's a lot of them, put that through an advert network or some other content delivery network, get it on a lot of web pages, you'll mine yourself a fair few Bitcoin. So luckily, the growth we've seen in 2018, which was 4,000%, I put that in air quotes, it's from McAfee. They're like Captain Scareware's major scareware company. Costs can have 4,000% growth. It was almost nothing in 2017 and there was some in 2018. So yeah, okay, it grew. That's about all we can tell from that. But it certainly grew in 2018, but in 2019 it's the price of Bitcoin has kept that from becoming more prevalent. But I wouldn't be surprised to see other distributed worker attacks happening within browsers. And again, it's hard to know, like unlike traditional malware that might be ransomware that would lock you out of your computer, or it might be something that's done just for malicious destruction. This is the sort of thing you wouldn't notice happening until your lap gets very warm because your PC's topping out a couple of cores 24/7. So it's subtle. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more of it when we find other ways to use computing power to generate some sort of financial profit. And again, we get down to using a content-aware technology. Luckily, all the people who were building these crypto mining malware used the same crypto mining code. Yeah, they weren't going to rewrite that. They just cut and pasted it from Stack Overflow. So we were able to spot that crypto mining code in people's JavaScript. Say probably our users don't want to be mining Bitcoin within a browser because it's dreadfully inefficient, so this is very likely to be a piece of malware, so we can block that as it comes down, and that's a way that web filtering can keep your electricity bill low. I've got too many slides here, haven't I? I should have given up halfway through. So another thing we've done this year is what we call alert but don't block. The internet, great and the good, are actually making some progress on being better internet citizens. Google and Facebook and folks like that are, entirely of their own volition and out of the goodness of their own hearts, starting to become better internet citizens. Nothing to do with any sorts of lawsuits or pressure from governments whatsoever. These are excellent people with our benefit at heart. But yeah, seriously. Now if you search for, it's as blurry as all heck, I'm afraid. Now if you search for suicide methods in Google in the UK, it'll pop up with a link to the Samaritans. And what we at Smoothwall and a lot of our colleagues in Safeguarding One is actually for our young people when they search for something like that to get appointed to help. So what we didn't want to do was say, we're going to block all phrases that pertain to that, because if those phrases are largely going to come up with directions towards something good and useful and sensible, as opposed to forums advising people to do crazy stuff, then we want people to see that. On the other hand, of course, a safeguarding lead in a school will want to know about that. So what we've put in place is 2 levels, things that when they're not going to give good advice, we block and alert, but when they are going to give good advice, we let that silently through, let those young people see that good advice, let them navigate to the pages that are going to give them some sort of comfort and help, but also still provide that alert back through to the DSL. So that's a distinction that we're glad to have been able to make, and we're glad that has actually occurred, that these searches don't immediately come the top of the search with pro-suicide, pro-anorexia sites like that. So Google have done a good job there, and it's not just those other internet properties like Facebook and Twitter have actually cleaned up their act and started to look at helping people, as we know, a really important subject. On that note, is the internet actually getting any better? We sit here and we talk about blocking websites, and we talk about the threats that are on the internet, and we talk about all those buttons. Are people actually trying? We've seen there Google are actually making some efforts to make the internet a better place, possibly a bit. So it was tried recently. Tumblr. I don't know if any of you noticed. Tumblr went safe for work 17th of December 2018. There's a few nodding heads and a few shaking heads at the back. Didn't notice it at all. No, never crossed my mind, sir. Nothing to do with that. Tumblr? Not safe for work, really? 30% lower traffic in 2019. They took a hit for going safe for work. Not really sure of their motives, but what we do know is that actually a bunch of that traffic ended up on Pornhub instead of Tumblr. Unfortunately, their efforts to go safe for work, once you've gone down that path, it's pretty difficult to come back. There are still many seriously inappropriate images on there. This took Chris, who's head of our digital safety team. I sit next to him and say, Chris, can you find me some porn on Tumblr? Hobbies. It took him 30 seconds. And one thing we've noticed is they use image analysis to detect which of their Tumblr accounts are pornographic. The image analysis can't handle GIFs. So there's so many animated GIFs on there, they just can't spot them. So if someone puts up a JPEG, they'll get taken down in 2 minutes flat, but they can't handle GIFs. So they're trying, but it's not really working. Final slide on the subject of new stuff. I just wanted to quickly cover what's been happening in terms of encryption on the internet. So we're now up to about 75% of internet requests that we see at Smoothwall are encrypted, up from 20% when we started measuring this stuff back in 2005, and up from about 70% last year. It's increasingly difficult to break TLS at the network level. We're seeing apps not using a certificate store, and we're seeing a sort of potential slow death in browsers. We see this as something that we may only have years left of actually being able to break TLS at a network level. So that's something that we have to have an awareness of in the web filter and safeguarding business. And I think it's something that school IT needs to be aware of. This is the changing face of the internet. There's that dichotomy. What we're doing in trying to look inside encrypted traffic on the internet is what the bad guys would love to do. Bad guys would love to sit in a Starbucks and watch people browsing and be able to see inside their bank transfer data. We would like to sit at the edge of a school network and see everything that goes on clear as day. Those two things are sort of the two sides of the same coin. So the pressure is on the manufacturers of browsers, the pressure is on the infrastructure of the internet companies like Amazon and Google, Cloudflare to make things more secure, but that makes our lives harder. So we may see a slow death in browsers. We have some ideas about how we might resolve that going forward. The door is not yet closed, however. The door is not yet closed. It's still perfectly capable of doing that today. DNS over HTTP is part of the changes that we'll see in TLS. So in TLS, we currently see a domain name available in the clear always with called server name indication. The latest efforts in TLS 1.3 are trying to encrypt that in order to do that, they're actually doing DNS over HTTP, which kind of sounded like a crazy joke to many techies when it first came out. You know, what's wrong with good old DNS? It works. But this is about securing DNS, about exchanging private keys so they can sort of encrypt traffic. And we've had some discussions at fairly high levels with ISPs in this country saying, you know, this will disrupt our internet filtering. So, you know, the filtering the government obliges ISPs to put on their DNS over HTTP will ruffle feathers there, because those guys are using DNS to do filtering. We've seen, I think we talked about it last night in the pub with Sky, Sky blocking DNS changes at all in their router, and basically silently scooping up people's DNS and redirecting it. You know, there's trouble brewing between ISPs, their capabilities, what the rest of the internet wants and what the UK government wants. So that'll be a fun one to watch unfold over the next 18 months, in my view. Well worth watching. And some of these solutions to security are causing more problems than solutions. So for those of you not familiar with HSTS, the catchy Hypertext Strict Transport Security, that's a way of saying never go on this website unless it's HTTPS. So the first time you visit the website, it upgrades you to HTTPS, and it sends something to your browser. It's a bit like a cookie that says, hey, if you ever go on this site again and it's not HTTPS, please prevent that. So it's a way of preventing what we call a downgrade attack. It's a way of preventing someone slipping in as a man in the middle and basically saying, hey, would you mind having this HTTP instead so I can see what you're doing? So that works, that's great, because it works on a sort of opportunistic basis. Yeah? You visit the site, it bumps you to HTTPS, it says never come back to HTTP. Fantastic. But there's something called HSTS preload, where browsers say, here is a list of sites upon which you may never go on HTTP. Microsoft banged out .gov.uk in that list. Not individual sites, all of .gov.uk. And there were some properties on there that simply couldn't do HTTPS. Some government sites, I think Basingstoke was one of them actually. I think a fairly local one there was one of them. Just couldn't be accessed out through Edge because of this preload, which Microsoft quickly undid, but it shows the types of things that are problematic when people try to increase security. They can also introduce other flaws, and there's also hostile public key pinning. So public key pinning is where a site says you can visit this site on HTTPS, but only ever use the certificate. But if the bad guys get to your site before you do, they can pin your site to their certificate, so you can never change it. US Postal Service got hit by that one a couple of years ago and ended up running over plain HTTP for a good 18 months. It was not fun. So, with all these changes, one surprise that we've seen is the rise in DNS-based web filters, which were kind of popular 10 years ago, and it surprised us to see these making a resurgence in the market, particularly over in the States. These things can't see inside content. They're blind to domain fronting. They find it hard to keep up with decentralized sites because they rely on lists. Malicious JavaScript will go straight through because you can't see anything in DNS. Can't differentiate good Tumblr from bad Tumblr. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably all bad Tumblr. What's not porn on there is probably boring. No nuance with Google. Doesn't have the issues we have with going inside HTTPS TLS, but doesn't gain the advantages either. So we're quite surprised to see this coming back. So this is not our bag. We built our content filter to deal with these things. You won't find Smoothwall going down the DNS filter route. What you might find in the near future, and some of you may have heard about, is us going down client-based filters, putting our filtering engine in places where we can see that traffic, where we can get that access to that traffic, like in browser plugins. That's basically where we're headed to hedge against not being able to see this traffic at the network. So there we go. Those are some of the wacky things that we've seen happening on the internet over the past 18 months. A little bit on how we combat them. Any questions from anybody? Oh, Tony, no, not you.
Is the move towards DNS-based filtering just a cost one?
I think for many people, yes, it's a cost one. For we've seen DNS-based filtering in corporates with things like Cisco Umbrella for a long time, and as I was saying to a few people here recently, in a corporate situation, you pick convenience and uptime over filtering efficacy. You know, you want a convenient web filter that doesn't get in the way of sort of everyday work that doesn't really do that fantastic job of filtering. That's really the sweet spot for corporate. For education, of course, we've got to have that safeguarding has to come first and foremost, even if some of the answers are slightly less convenient.
So realistically, for schools, we've got to turn around and say, good, fast, cheap, pick any 2 out of 3 isn't something you can use. It's got to be good. It's got to be fast. It ain't going to be cheap.
Potentially for where cheap might mean not just money, might mean, you know, you might have to work a bit harder to do web filtering in a school than you would in a corporate, for sure. You know, I've raised that to good, fast, cheap, secure. Pick any 2, expect to get 1. But I'm a Yorkshireman, I'm a natural born pessimist. Well, that looks like it's it for questions. Cheers, Tony. Thank you for at least giving me one. Thank you very much, everybody.